I'm Any New Province, and this week we're playing Red Deck Wins for Net Benefits, the series where we explore the benefits of net decking in Pauper. This specific version of Red Deck Wins comes from grinderA, who took it to a top 8 finish in the Pauper Challenge this weekend. People have been calling mono red decks with creatures instead of burn spells Red Deck Wins since the classic deck Sly, or Slay, I'm not really sure how it's pronounced. Anyway, it's spelled S-L-I-G-H, and people started calling it Red Deck Wins back when that was around. This version of RDW wins like a lot of its cousins. It commits a ton of aggressive creatures to the board before antheming them and winning out of nowhere around your opponent's blockers. I'll start by explaining our Anthem effects. First, we have Goblin Bushwhacker. It costs 1 red, it's a 1/1, and it has Kicker, which means you may pay an additional red as you cast the spell. When Goblin Bushwhacker enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. That counts the Goblin Bushwhacker as well. Getting +1/+0 in haste from kicking a Goblin Bushwhacker is usually enough to do the trick, but we have included a 5th Anthem that has a little bit more kick just in case. This is Dynacharge. It costs 1 red, it's an instant, and it says, target creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn, but it also has Overload for 2 and a red, which means you may cast this spell for its Overload cost. If you do, change its text by replacing all instances of target with each. That means we can give all of our creatures +2/+0, and that should be plenty to kill our opponent. Next, I'll explain our low-cost aggressive creatures that we're going to use to start clocking our opponent as early as turn 1. First, we have Foundry Street Denizen, which costs 1 red, it's a 1/1, and you want to commit it first. That's because whenever another red creature enters the battlefield under your control, Foundry Street Denizen gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Goblin Cohort costs 1 red, it's a 2/2, and it can't attack unless you've cast a creature spell this turn. That would be risky in a deck that doesn't run a ton of creatures, but we've got lots of those to keep our Goblin Cohort turning sideways. Next is Jackal Familiar, another 1 red mana 2/2, but it has a different restriction than the Cohort. It says Jackal Familiar can't attack or block alone. Again, we have tons of creatures in our deck, so it really shouldn't be hard to keep Jackal Familiar attacking. Finally, we have Mog Conscripts, which are exactly the same as Goblin Cohort, except they're conscripts, so they have a few more goblins on their art. But anyway, they can't attack unless you cast a creature spell this turn. We're trying to close this game out as quickly as we can, so we've included a bunch of haste creatures to do just that. First, we have Mud Brawler Cohort. It costs 1 and a red, it's a 2/2, it has haste, and it gets +1/+1 as long as you control another red creature. We also have Valley Dasher, which a lot of people were clamoring about not being included in the Cascade Aggro 75. Valley Dasher costs 1 and a red, it has haste, and it attacks each combat if able. Our last 2-drop is Burning Tree Emissary. When it enters the battlefield, it adds red and green to our mana pool. It's a 2 mana 2/2. This helps us get that explosive start on turn 2. We play Burning Tree Emissary into Mud Brawler Cohort or Valley Dasher. Valley Dasher is attacking each combat if able, so it's getting in there, and I'm pretty sure our Mud Brawler cohorts are going to want to get in there on turn 2 as well. Sometimes our opponents are going to have a pretty big board as well. We're going to need a way to punch through that. That's why we've included a couple of Goblin Heel Cutters. They cost 3 and a red, they're a 3/2, and we can cast them for their dash cost, which costs 2 and a red. That means you cast it for its dash cost, it attacks, it gets in, then we return it to our hand at the end of our turn. When it attacks, target creature can't block this turn. Hopefully that'll allow us to punch through those last points of crucial damage. Speaking of punching through those last few points of damage, we're also running a few high-quality burn spells. First, we have Reckless Abandon, which says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. It usually costs 1 red on its own. Reckless Abandon deals 4 damage to any target. That means we can use this as removal to keep our opponent's creatures off board to continue getting in with our red creatures, or we can just send it at our opponent's face for the win. We're also running 4 Lightning Bolts, one of the best burn spells in the entire game of Magic the Gathering. It costs 1 red and it deals 3 damage to any target. Finally, we have 2 Fire Blast. This is for using up those mountains that we don't need anymore. Fire Blast costs 4 red, which we're probably never going to pay. It's an instant, and it says, you may sacrifice 2 mountains rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Fire Blast deals 4 damage to any target. Alright, let's have a look at this mana base. Pretty unsurprisingly, it's just 17 basic mountains. We want all of our lands to enter the battlefield untapped. We might not draw that many, and we might need to get to 2 untapped mana at a critical time. That's why it's just tons of basic untapped mountains. Okay, let's look at this sideboard. First, we have 2 Gut Shot for shooting those fairies out of the air or killing a Tireless Tribe when our opponent tries to combo off. We have 3 Smash to Smithereens to blow up our opponent's artifacts and keep being productive about dealing damage to them. We have 2 Sting Scourgers for bouncing a problematic elf that's boggled up, or even bouncing just a big Gurmag angler we can't deal with. We have 2 Flaring Pains for when our Tron opponents are trying to fog us out and create a moment of peace. We have 3 Flame Slashes also to come in against Affinity to kill those Mirror Enforcers, but also if we're actually somehow incidentally the control deck and need to sideboard into better removal. We're also running 3 Electrickeries. If our opponent is going crazy with X1s, we need a way to sweep the board. And there it is, Red Deck wins by grinderA. Congratulations again on your top 8 finish, grinderA. We're going to take your deck live into a league at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince. We're there every Monday night at 7 p.m. Atlantic time playing competitive Pauper decks. Before I go, I'd just like to ask you to consider liking the video or subscribing to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and hopefully I'll see you on Monday night.